Good morning, everyone. Hi, Chris. This is Megan. We are all ready to go and we're live on YouTube whenever you're ready.
Hey, Chris, nice job with the prospective retreat.
Chris, you're muted.
All right, let me start over again. Thank you, Megan. All right, this meeting is called to order. This is the May 12th, 2022 regular meeting of the Energy and Climate Team. Just as a reminder, everybody, that we are being streamed live on the city's YouTube channel. So next up is the roll call. So if Megan, if you could call the roll, I'd appreciate it.
You bet. Chris.
Here.
Jeremy.
You're still muted, but we heard you, Jeremy.
I see your face. We're good.
Sorry, I am here. Thank you.
Thanks.
Just barely.
Trevor.
Here.
Brian. No Brian yet. Scott.
Brian Brian emailed Chris and I ahead of time that he has an appointment this morning and we'll miss.
Gotcha. Thank you. And Scott said here. Jonathan.
I'm here.
Great. Allie.
Here.
Chad. No Chad yet.
Chad also emailed that he will be a few minutes late, but should be here shortly.
Gotcha. Virgil? No Virgil yet. Ellis? No Ellis yet. Aviv?
Here.
Great. And Amber? No Amber yet. Okay. Well, we do have a quorum right now. So if Brian isn't here in time for the vote, or sorry, Chad, we still have a quorum.
Sounds good. Next up, item 3, announcements and updates. I just had a few things I wanted to mention that I noted from the last city council meeting, actually. One of the items is that Brian von Lossberg, the former city councilor, received a $40,000 contract from the city council to work on the 100% clean electricity project. So that's great. It'll maybe give that a kickstart. It's as everybody may be aware, the city signed an MOU with Northwestern Energy, along also with Missoula County, to work toward 100% clean electricity in our local grid. That happened, probably about a year ago now. And there was at one point a draft work plan. I think that had a different name to it, but there was a lot of back and forth on that. And I don't know where the status of that is. There was also a green tariff as part of that, that the city of Missoula is working with the city of Bozeman and I believe Helena as well on. But anyways, we haven't talked much about the 100% clean electricity, even though it's part of our core elements. I think mostly because things, as often do, go kind of slow with Northwestern Energy. It's also worth noting that Northwestern Energy did commit to a 100% clean electricity goal by 2050. So that came out some weeks ago. At some point, we might want to take a look at it, but that's kind of a long way out. But as we know, they're a pretty cautious bunch, and so I'm sure there's going to be a lot of effort in trying to encourage them to move faster than that. But at least that's now on paper. The next item I wanted to mention. The city council approved the conceptual plan for the Currents Center for Recreation and Creativity, which we heard about a number of months ago. That'll be a real community center there, right next, attached to Currents. And we talked to them about all the energy saving opportunities and renewable energy opportunities in that building. And so that's something they were already embracing, and we'll probably continue to work with them on. So they're going to be taking public comment through the end of the month. There's actually a public comment meeting, I think on the 23rd, if anybody wants to attend, but a real opportunity to build ourselves a community center, which we don't have, and an opportunity to do some really innovative energy conservation and renewable energy. So that's moving forward, although the $40+ million price tag will probably keep it from actually, groundbreaking for, who knows, years maybe. Another thing from the city council meeting that I found interesting is they've signed a contract with a consulting firm for a comprehensive code reform process. So as you know, or maybe I've read this, the county is completing their code reform process the first time in 50 years. And so the city is going to follow suit on that. Right now, there's nothing in the code for development that looks at energy conservation specifically, or renewable energy. And I'm sure that'll end up becoming a component of any code reform. But exactly what that looks like, is it going to be an incentive to builders? Is it going to be a mandate? What's it going to look like in terms of having to do certain, LED lights, or, a certain amount of insulation, or ground source heat pumps, or whatever it's going to be? We don't really know.
Chris, I think Allie had her hand up just a moment ago as
sure.
well.
Hey, Allie, please jump on in.
Hi, thanks. I figured maybe my question could wait, but it was about the Currents project, and I can't remember from last time. Also, I'm sorry, I don't quite know if I'm allowed to just pop in while you're going through these agenda items. I don't quite have the hang of the flow of everything yet, so sorry. But I'm wondering how I may have forgotten from last month, but how does that new Currents build impact the projects that we'll be potentially recommending from the list that we're looking at? Does that sort of negate any of those, or and maybe we talk about that next or whenever that item comes up?
No, it actually doesn't fall under our next discussion item or our action item. Since it's not built, it doesn't come under any of the stuff that McKinstry's doing. They're only looking at current facilities. So it would be a completely separate process than that. And in terms of jumping in, you certainly can. We just try not to talk over each other. If you use the hand raise, or Jeremy helps me because I may not always notice it. We just always we try to keep it open, and then that's sort of respectful, so we're not talking over each other. But please feel free to chime in whenever you have something to say, or a question, or whatever.
Great, thank you.
This separate, maybe not announcement, but a question maybe for the team is, now that we're at the end of the school year, I was thinking, at least for the summer, of changing our meeting times back to noon, every other Thursday at noon instead of every other Thursday at 8. So we'll probably send out a little doodle poll or something about that, at least for the 3 months of summer. And so Scott's got his hand up. You're muted, Scott. All right. Anyways, anybody else have any other updates or announcements they'd like to bring forward?
Chris, there's a member of the public with their hand up. Would you like to take their question now?
Let's do that with the next item.
Okay.
So if no one else has any announcements or updates, the next item on our agenda is public comments on items not listed on the agenda. Megan has put up on the screen how you can join by computer or phone. Looks like we're having some technical difficulty with Scott's connection. He's not able to unmute. So anyways, maybe Megan, you can check on that. But anyways, so here is the information. If there's any other public that wishes to comment, it sounds like we may have somebody who wishes to comment at this point. So Megan, if you could connect them, that'd be great.
Caller, I don't have a name for you, but I've unmuted you if you have anything you'd like to contribute.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hello? Okay, this is Amber. Sorry, I'm trying, this is clunky because I'm sitting here trying to unmute and I'm doing it in wrong ways, I guess. I don't know if I've been promoted to panelist or not. I just wanted to add with regard to the community center that's been in the works for many decades, actually, trying to kind of come to a conceptual design and figure out funding for it. But what we did vote on, and I think Chris said this, but I just want to make that clear. We voted on just the conceptual design and the idea that we would, you know, have kind of renewable energy options as part of it. And, you know, we're far from figuring out the funding on that or moving forward. So that's, you know, reasonably far in the future. And I would say I'm really excited to have Brian von Lossberg, who was taking a lot of these threads with Northwest Energy and different initiatives in the city to be part of the group again. And we all know that Lee, it's a big lift, and Lee needs as many people involved and help as she can. So he's going to be a great addition. That's, I think, a big step forward for us.
Amber, I'm not able to promote you to panelist since you're calling in, unfortunately.
Oh, dang it. Okay, well, I'll just keep raising my hand, I guess.
Sounds good. I'll keep my eye out.
Thanks. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, one last thing on the Northwestern Energy, the lead had been through the county. Diana Mineta was the lead through the county, and that position, Diana has moved on. I don't know if that position's been filled and anybody has any information on that, but as a result, we don't really have a lead on that 100% clean electricity, and maybe that's one of the roles that Brian will take on.
Hey, Chris,
Yeah.
I have an update on that. So Caroline Lauer, who was the program coordinator with Diana, has taken over Diana's role. So she was promoted to that position, and I believe they're hiring now a coordinator position that Caroline was in previously.
Right. Well, we'll have to reach out to Caroline, and I'm sure you guys through the city staff are working with her already. All right. Next up, item 5, action items.
Chris, do you want to approve the minutes real quick?
Oh yeah, thank you.
Perfect.
I could miss my head if it wasn't attached. All right, the minutes from the meeting from April 14, 2022. Hopefully everyone has had a chance to look at those. I went through them, they look good to me. Does anybody have any comments on the minutes, any changes?
Move approval.
Okay, Scott moved for approval. Anyone else wish to second that?
I'll second it.
Thanks, Trevor. All right. And hearing no other opposition, we move to approve those minutes. Those minutes are approved.
Thank you.
All right. The next up, the review of the McKinstry project list, their pre-approval project list. So I sent out that list as a PDF. I also have it as a spreadsheet, so folks may want to get the spreadsheet. I should send it out. But as we heard at our last meeting, we spent a lot of time obviously going through their list and having them explain it, and really getting pretty into a lot of what they've been talking about and a lot of what they're proposing. They've talked at least on a broad level to all the city departments now, the city council, and are looking to move to the next phase under their energy performance contract. I had it up. I don't seem to have it up now, but which is to try to get some of these projects into approval stage, I guess. So they wouldn't all move forward at once, but some of them may move forward in the coming budget cycle. And so they're trying to move this forward to be ready for the budget process, which begins this summer, usually for the end of the year. If that's correct, Amber, you guys, your budget, it's a calendar year, but you start reviewing it in July or August. All right.
I think she can stay. Amber, are you still muted? It looked like you weren't, and then now you are again. Okay.
Amber, the question was
about when we start our budget process. Yeah, this is a little clunky to do it this way, so I will answer the questions that I should answer, but if Lee or anyone else can jump in for the ones that we both could answer. Yes, we're going to start reviewing. Actually, we may be starting next month. We normally finalize the budget. We get our numbers as far as our funding. It's kind of a little bit backwards, but that comes in from the Department of Revenue after we kind of look through budgetary items. So sometimes we have to cut things afterwards, but we should finalize it, I think, in July, and it comes in August. But all those, it's obviously a very complex, large budget. And so all of those presentations and funding and the mayoral budget that we're reviewing start coming in well ahead of that. So I think we'll start anytime.
Thanks, Amber. So it's some of these projects may end up on that budget. One of the things that we've talked about is what role the energy and climate team should play in this process. And obviously, you've been trying to promote some of the ideas that McKinstry has brought forward, trying to understand some of the projects that they're proposing. And for today's meeting, one of the things that we talked about in that note I sent out was we need to find a way to look at all these projects and try to focus on priorities, whether that's as a group of projects or as individual projects. So I'm going to go through quickly kind of what I've come up with as a start. I'm not sure if it's quite what we want to do, but it's kind of the way I'm thinking. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here and show you what I've been thinking. Okay, let's see.
Chris, do you want to finish the non-action items?
No, on our agenda, it had the action items listed first on the agenda.
Oh, okay.
All right, so this is the worksheet. If everyone can see this, all right. And it's a long list, as everyone knows. It just kind of goes on and on. So there's a lot to consider. One of the ways I was considering it was looking at project by project, trying to figure out from an energy conservation standpoint, which ones work best, and also trying to consider, at least in part, the dollar amounts. And let me just show you what I'm talking about. So this first one here is a ground source heat pump at the aquatic center. Install an open loop groundwater well that provides a constant source of heat to produce pool, HVAC, and domestic water heating. Secondary systems will likely be needed for the coldest winter and to boost DHW temperatures. So the budget for this would be $1.15 million. It would have an annual utility savings of a negative $15,000. In other words, when it's negative like that, it will cost the city $15,000 in additional costs. So not a great deal that way. So it's not a big money saver for the city, at least initially. And so I have that as a red. And the way I'm doing this, as you'll see here, is 3 shades of red and 3 shades of green. Each one represents a 1 or 2 or a 3. So the greenest of green is this is a 2. The lightest green is a 1. This is a minus 43%, so that would be a negative. And so you add up all the scores. Here's the dollars per ton of carbon. So that's pretty high, 61,000. So this overall thing had a -3, which is quite a bit. It's not a great score, even though we've discussed how ground source heat pumps are a great opportunity. We have a real good source of shallow groundwater that we can use to extract heat from and help to heat the building, help to heat the water. But the cost of installation is considerable. So Ellie, do you have a question?
Go ahead, Allie.
Oh, thanks. I just wanted to double check on some of the metrics here. So percent electricity saved, if it's negative, that means it's using more energy rather than saving?
Correct. Yeah. In this case, negative means it's, so what we're doing is we're transitioning from a gas source of heat. So this is why the saving here is plus 41.8 to an electric source of heat, which is a minus 43.
Okay.
But the net here is 18.6 on the carbon, metric tons of carbon CO2 equivalent. And the reason why is our electric grid is already at the 60%, 62%, whatever, renewable energy. So by electrification, which is one of the things we're obviously talking a lot about, you get a net carbon increase, even though it's sort of a close to a 1-to-1 change gas to electricity. So that's a real positive in this case. But again, the cost per ton is high. Now, what this doesn't look at is the fact that this is not something that would last 1 or 2 or 3 years. Once they've done this, this would be the source of heat for this building for as long as it exists, more than likely. And so we almost have to add some additional data to really understand this. One of the things that's interesting is this is a 0, and this is the simple payback. In other words, how long it takes to pay back something like this. And I believe it must be 0 because the city is just going to pay the whole upfront cost. It doesn't quite make sense to me why that's 0. But anyways,
Chris, can you
John,
explain the scoring system that you have there in column AH? Like the -3 compared to a 7 down below?
Yeah. So, all right. So with the 7, the lightest green, and I could have put an extra column and put a number in, which is probably what I would do. That the lightest green is a +1. The medium green color is a +2.
Okay.
The darker green color is a +3. And here's the carbon tons. That's a light green. That's a 1. So you add those up and you come up with 7. I think I'm off by a number there.
But so a +7 is better than a -3. So a
Right.
positive number, and the larger the positive number, the stronger it is. in the scoring system. Is that correct?
That's correct. And it's,
Okay.
and again, this is just one way to consider this. So this one here, which is remove the existing lazy river splash and lap gas fired pool heaters, replaced with air to water heat pumps to electrify the pool water heating load. So this is another heat pump thing. And it's got some really big negatives and positives here. The payback is 541 years, simple payback. And that's a lot, even though we have some incentives here, but not a ton of incentives. So it goes from the simple payback without incentives, 849 years, with incentives. And here's the incentive, 1.245 million incentive. But nonetheless, if we were to just pay this back without, on an annual basis, for the money it would cost to save this annual savings. And this is not quite exactly right, but anyways, it's a really big number. However, your savings on electricity are really significant. Actually, no, this is reversed here. Now that's kind of funny because it's the opposite of this one. But nonetheless, you get a large carbon savings. Your price per ton is a little high, but not too bad. But this is one of these long-term ones. And so it's interesting. This one's a -3 and this one's a 3. So the system's not perfect, but we would sort of try to work out a system like this. Another way to look at this that I was thinking is looking at types of projects. So the filter wouldn't necessarily be on individual projects, but on type of projects. So my thought there is like the one thing that we think is generally a really good a project level activity is retrofitting to LED lights. So we can see we've got a number of these. Their simple payback is generally under 20 years, which is good. Not all of them. One of the fire station one, number one is 149. I'm not sure why that's so high, but we could also look at these and say generally LED retrofits are a very big bang for your buck. You can see the metric tons per ton of carbon are generally in this 2, 3, 4, 5,000, other than a couple of these projects that may not move forward. So we could recommend in general that this is something the city council should approve or the city departments should move forward with. So that's another way to look at these projects is using that sort of filter, I guess. One of the other things. Yeah, go ahead, Chairman.
In addition to the LED lighting, I think the envelope sealing for all of the different facilities is a potential, the simple payback is oftentimes, relatively low in the 20-year range. So I think the envelope sealing could be considered in the same breath with the LED lighting.
There we can see it, almost all under 20 years or close to 20 years. All positive in the CO2 savings, almost all of them in that $2,000-3,000 per ton. So yeah, that's another one that looks like a slam dunk by and large.
Chris, I have a quick question again, and that is my original question. But the metric tons of CO2 equivalent saved, is that annual or over the lifetime? What's the time scale on that?
I believe that's an annual. So, and some of these, like this column here, annual utility savings is that's annual, and I believe this is also the cost per ton. Now, that's a good question. Lee,
Chris,
if you're around, do you have an answer?
Chris, I have written down that metric tons of carbon saved is an annual number.
Annual number.
From one read and from last month.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And could someone also explain the dollars per metric ton? What exactly is that?
Let's see here.
Yeah, that column.
Yeah, so let's see here. They don't have the calculations for us here in the little window, but I believe it has something to do with the metric tons divided into the total cost of the project. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, it's basically how much it's going to cost per metric ton saved. So it kind of just gives us a bang for our buck sort of metric.
Cool, thank you.
That isn't quite right, but they did go over it, but I'm trying to remember, yeah. But it's bang for the buck, right? Another thing that we've talked about being a high priority are these heat pumps. So we have a lot of these projects, and these get complicated. They're proposing about a dozen of them. Like this one here at fire station number 1, centralize all exhaust in the building, so forth. There's actually some of these are really complicated, and these are going to be the challenging ones, I think, moving forward. And each one of these is going to require some additional analysis. But in this case, this fire station 1, $626,000 a metric ton. It does not sound really, really great that way. It does save a little carbon, but not a lot. The cost to the city is significant, $1.2 million. So just on the surface, that doesn't look good. But on some of these other ones, you do have a reasonable level, like in the case of this Splash Montana. And but just because these numbers are high doesn't mean they are not something we want, because unlike some other things, the life expectancy of an LED light might be 10 years. The life expectancy of one of these heat pumps might be 30 or 40 years. So you have to take that into account. And I don't know, Lee, if you have any thoughts on, this kind of number versus, a $13,000 number.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of where we're making decisions at the city as well. And part of this conversation is, where do we forego the thought that, oh, this is really expensive, in favor of projects that will really help us meet our carbon goals, our carbon reduction goals.
And obviously the city departments are also going to look at the life expectancy of a project like this, that if that would be a useful column in here. Are they going to do this anyways? This allows them to move forward with a project. If they needed to come up with $1.5 million to build a project, they'd have to go out to the bond market, or the city would have to take on a loan. It'd be an involved process. The city may or may not want to do that. As you recall, with energy performance contracting, that 1.5 million, whatever it happens to be, that entire cost is incurred by McKinstry, and the city pays them back on an annual basis. Essentially, if our utility bill was, for these pools, it's huge. But let's say it's $50,000 annually. I think it's like $20,000 a month is what it really is. But and the difference is, and I know Tim talked about this at the last meeting, the difference between what we've been paying and what it'll cost now, because we're using less electricity, or what it costs them to install it, is where their profit comes out of this. So it's like a loan without having a loan. It's like a bond without a bond. So they take the risk on, but what the city takes on is some pretty heavy burden in terms of cost per ton and various things like that. So do they wish to take on that kind of risk on a project that may take 20 or 30, 40 years to pay off? As you recall, under state law, things can't take more than 20 years. So if they take more than 20 years, like this one takes 240 years, the city has to pay the difference between what it would cost. If it took 20 years, they'd have to pay that difference up front. So there's another dollar amount issue that comes forward.
I would also add, there was a project under the city shops facility grouping about updating air ventilation or air filters, and it was to bring it to code actually. So it seemed like there's some of these, there's like a direct health impact as well. And I feel like that should have a some weight. Yeah, I think that green one.
Yeah, so it's interesting when we're considering it versus all the considerations. And so if we're just considering energy conservation, the project may look one way, but when you consider health codes or other issues that have to be addressed, or we're going to do it anyways, then that changes it. Now, we may not be able to answer all those questions, and that's why using a filter like we're talking about is focused on conservation, and it's focused on dollars to some extent, but it'll give at least the folks, the decision makers, the city council in this case, some metric to look at. It certainly won't be the only metric. Scott's got his hand up.
Yep.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Yeah, Ally, you brought up exactly the same point that I was going to. So let me move beyond that. But anything that's health and safety, I think, needs to move toward the front of the queue. I also like the way Chris has broken down this rather complex chart. And there are some standard things that are, if I get Northwest Energy to come to my house and do an audit, they're going to say, well, improve the building envelope, switch out all of your lights, put in LEDs, and so on and so forth. So I think all of those things can be lumped together and should generally be approved by the committee. The other thing, if the city really is committed, and there are arguments both for and against moving entirely to electric sources, then all of those projects that switch out from gas to electric should also move to the front of the queue. But those are all ones that are much more expensive. But we need to know whether or not that's a priority of the city, or we could recommend to the city that that be a priority. And then that changes some of the rankings, because a couple of the ones that you identified, Chris, that are the most expensive involve almost exclusively switching from gas to electric.
Right, and along with that, we discussed this earlier, is the 100% clean electricity. So while we're at 62, 64% now, if we do move to 100%, that's another 38, 36% additional carbon reduction. And even at 62 or 64%, that's a significant reduction in carbon. Even if the cost is neutral or there's an additional cost to the city. So I agree with you on that one, Scott, for sure. So I put forward a couple ideas to look at. One is generally, like Scott reaffirmed, electrification being an area that we should move forward in, or LEDs being an area we should move forward in versus individual projects. So we can have a combination of two. We can suggest that we need to look at this type of project, but when you get into some of these other more massive projects like these heat pumps, we may wish to do a more detailed look at them and decide whether we would move forward with them. But that's just some ideas. So I'm going to open the floor up to discussion on how we wish to proceed on this to provide some help and support to the council when they start seeing these things come through on a budgetary basis.
Chris, I just wanted to, I think you mentioned this earlier, but I just wanted to reiterate that the master contract for this project kind of leaves the door open to add projects as we go. And so there is kind of a potential to make recommendations to move forward on this low-hanging fruit that I think both have the payback and the carbon savings that we're all looking for as an initial package, and then kind of continue to add on projects as there is funding or as the city kind of narrows in on its priorities. And so, yeah, I just wanted to reiterate that.
Thanks, Lee. I have a quick question. Are we looking to put together a package today here, us, to recommend at the end of this meeting? Or when are we looking to do that?
I put it as an action item in case we did come up with some things we wish to act on. As you know, with the Montana open laws, open meetings laws, if it is not published as a potential action item, we can't act on it. So I just put it there just in case. So I'm not necessarily saying one way or the other whether we need to vote on something. If there's a few things that we just agree on wholeheartedly, we can move that forward in a motion. But otherwise, yeah, as Lee suggests, this is going to be a long-term sort of set of projects, and we'll have time to continue to go through them. We don't have to say today exactly how we think the city council should move forward.
Great, thank you. That's sort of the general feeling that I was getting to, but I realized that that's why you put that action item in the agenda. So thanks for keeping that open.
I have a question or a thought that I would appreciate other folks' input on, and this is something that I'm still kind of developing in my own mind. If the long-term goal is to transition away from gas over to electricity, with the intent that that electricity is a clean source, and in the short term, if Northwestern Energy is looking to build a gas-fired power plant, at this point in time, we don't know if that's going to move forward or if that's going to be replaced with something else. But it's an interesting conversion if the city moves from gas to electric, and then Northwestern Energy builds a gas plant that, obviously uses a lot more gas. I guess I just throw that out there as a source of discussion and thoughts as far as that whole situation. It feels counterintuitive a little bit.
One of the elements that we used to talk about was that natural gas was going to be the transition fuel between coal and full renewable. And we thought that was going to take 40 years. Based on the much reduced costs of wind and solar, the improvement in technologies, we think that's going to take a lot less. And the question is about whether you convert from coal to natural gas to wind or electricity is now up in the air. The one value they talked about with natural gas is, so we've got our Colstrip power plant, which just declared bankruptcy this week, Talon Energy, the operator of it, because of costs. There is more CO2 equivalent per kilowatt hour of electricity emitted from a coal-fired power plant than from a natural gas, because as we know, when you convert CH4, which is methane, to CO2, I forget what it is, but it's a pretty good factor, 2 or 3 times less CO2 per kilowatt hour. So by moving from Colstrip to the Laurel natural gas plant, we will see a reduction in CO2 emissions. Again, it's not the ideal world because technology is going to allow us to move right from coal to renewable, at least in some places. Northwestern Energy is a very conservative organization. They don't want to, put anything at risk, and that's good because we don't want anything to happen like happened in Texas, where you have a wild, crazy, Western electrical grid. You want things to be calm and good. So I don't want to give them a hard time for that, but there is some useful trade-off between those two.
I would also add, I think there's benefit to the two things happening parallel. I think we do need to set our systems up so that they are electric, so that when we can get full clean electricity, we can like immediately see those benefits. And I think like we are at the same time working with Northwestern Energy to update that power mix in a way that we want and that's aligned with our goals. So I do still think there's benefit to electrifying where we can.
Right.
And
I definitely agree. There's huge benefits to electrifying.
But it's a great sentiment. It's something to think about. I think you're right that people might see like that we've gone electric, but not realize that means now our fuels are being burned off-site rather than on-site,
Right.
and are potentially causing higher emissions. So it's absolutely a factor.
Well, we are fortunate that we have such a high percentage of our electricity coming from renewables already, one of the highest rates in the nation. And this is basically the whole Northwestern US, as well as parts of the upper Missouri Basin, Tennessee Valley Authority, some of these areas that have a lot of dams. Now, you can talk about whether dams that kill salmon are green or not. The energy is green, but the process may not be, and that's another story. But for now, the electricity is substantially renewable, which is just something that you want to take advantage of because it's not going to go backwards. We're not going to get less of our electricity from renewable sources going forward unless we decide to, take out all the dams, which I don't think is going to happen. Now, one thought I'm gonna ask Lee about this. I know, Lee, you're pushing the idea of electrification, and the city is considering that and maybe moving that direction, but there hasn't been a formal policy set within the administration or by the city council on electrification. And one thought is maybe that is something to move forward with, set it as a stated goal, either through the city administration or the city council. What are your thoughts on that, Lee?
Yeah, that's an interesting thought, Chris. And that's a really good point, is that we do talk a lot about electrification goals, and that's a strategy identified for our carbon neutrality and 100% clean electricity efforts, but you're right, not a formal adoption internally at the city. We could kind of put forth a resolution encouraging electrification outside of city operations, but we don't have the authority to require it in any way for anybody outside of city-owned buildings.
No, obviously we don't, but I could see a resolution going to the city council and encourage them to pass a resolution that within the city facilities that electrification should be a priority, and suggesting that it could also be a priority for the community. So that's something we can work out for the next meeting as a way to help move that ball forward. If anybody has any comment on trying to get the city council to act on something like that.
And we have been having some conversations with Councilman Carlino, who is interested in putting a climate emergency resolution forward. And we've been talking about the potential to connect climate goals with affordable housing and equity goals as well. And so I think there's a huge argument to be made around electrification of affordable housing so that everybody has, access to clean air and not contributing to the effects of climate change.
And it was last year we had two different speakers come in and talk about the affordable housing process and projects moving forward. And one of the things that we ran into is that these projects often involve multiple funding sources and both private, nonprofit, and governmental entities. And it was hard to think about a way to move that forward in a way other than just encouragement, when a private entity is building affordable houses or money is provided through federal grants, county money, city money, local nonprofits, how you work that. And so that's good to hear that discussion is moving forward, because that was a nut I could not figure out how to crack. Is how to move that in. And I think the equity part of this is another thing. Climate change is an equity issue in a lot of ways, as we see the impacts of climate change impacting disproportionately people of lower economic systems and people of color. So that's something we also know. And so climate change is in itself an equity issue. Does somebody else want to, Jeremy, did you want to jump in on that?
Oh, I'm just would like to echo that climate change is an equity issue and is a all of the above everything issue. So for sure.
Yeah, so that's an easy way to do that.
With something like asking council to adopt a resolution or bring forth a resolution, is that something that we would write and present to them, or would we recommend certain actions that should be there? How does that work?
I was just got something from Amber I wanted to reference here. She's having a little hard time commenting. And she basically said on the electrification, let's discuss this at our next leadership meeting, but she'd be happy to sponsor if it makes sense. So, well, I don't want to table that, but to answer your question, Allie, resolutions tend to be broad in nature. They can be specific at times, but generally they're broad in nature and encourage or promote the use of something, instead of a specific element. But they can be, if you have something on the drawing board and it's a specific project, you can have a resolution that targets that. But at this point, we don't. I would say it would be pretty broad.
And I just want to bring up too some opportunity as the climate strategic implementation working team is working on a climate lens for city internal decision making. Here's an opportunity where we could create a policy or a recommendation that team kind of prioritizes electrification in new building. As Ali mentioned, like the Currents building is coming up and the city is acquiring different buildings and different properties. We could encourage that electrification is required in new operations.
As we move, we're going to get to a discussion on the retreat here shortly, but one of the proposed areas where this team could work going forward, and has been encouraged by at least one of our members, is in developing policies and then forwarding those on, instead of just, we should do this, it would be great to do this. Actually writing a policy in this case about electrification or something like that. And so as we get into this strategic planning process, one of the ideas is that something we want to do as a team? Do we want to develop policies?
Chris, one of the things that I think that we should consider specifically with this spreadsheet of facility improvement measures from McKinstry is I don't sense that we're going to come to a resolution today as far as, and I shouldn't have said resolution. I don't sense that we're going to come to a recommendation today for City Council and the specific departments, but I think we should consider having a specific recommendation and specific items on this checklist to recommend. And maybe that means diving in and doing additional work. I know, Brian Kearns is not here. I think it would be interesting to get his feedback as far as specific projects. He's been through projects like this with University of Montana and I believe has a great deal of expertise. So I think it would be beneficial to gather that expertise, and then to, individually to do a deep dive amongst each one of us, and to either vote on that at the next meeting in June, or to have a special meeting, here at the end of May, with the sole purpose of having this ready to go so that it can be presented to city council as well as the different city departments. And Lee might have a good idea if that makes sense to do it, sooner rather than later, i.e. 2 weeks from now, or if it would make sense to do that at the June meeting.
I don't have a strong sense of timing. I guess it's kind of what this group is willing and able to commit to.
Lee, do you have a sense as far as how soon city departments will be moving forward?
It feels like there's some urgency around the budget process. And so I think, as Amber was mentioning at the beginning of the meeting, budget discussions start at the end of June. And so.
Amber, I have unmuted you if you would like to talk.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, and I'm sorry I'm having to call in this morning and make this difficult, but yeah, I would agree with that, Lee, that there's some urgency around the budget. Unfortunately, what happens pretty regularly is that, ideas and requests come so late that it's very hard to incorporate them. So for sure, I would say that there's some urgency to that. And I was just going to say another thing, just stepping back on a resolution for electrification. We can discuss. Let's discuss that further and what that means. When we do resolutions, we obviously need to vet them pretty carefully and also run them through the legal and all these other things. But I'd be happy to move forward as that makes sense and look at what that, what form that might take.
Thanks, Amber. Scott?
I do think, just to
Okay.
add also, I think that it would make sense to do this as a standalone resolution.
Yeah, Amber, would you stay on the line? Because my question will relate to what's possible. So
Yeah.
Robin, who was on the committee before, was focused on a policy that would relate to building codes. And I know we can recommend in terms of city buildings, but I don't know whether or not state law prohibits the city from developing building codes that would, for example, right now, many of the houses being built in Missoula are not sited so as to allow for solar power. New developments are coming online, but the houses are not sited so that, or many of the houses are not sited so they could make use of solar energy. So have we got room to develop a policy that would talk about codes relating to, for example, the siting of houses?
So I don't know specifically with the siting of houses, and there's always nuances in state law, but my understanding is we do not have a whole lot of flexibility with requirements around building codes. That is something that's dictated by state law. But if we have something specific, I could look into something specific, but our sideboards are kind of tight on that one, is what I will say. Building codes
Okay,
are something I would love to be able to look at locally and dictate locally, but yeah, it's my understanding is that that's a pretty tight sideboard we have.
Yeah, one thing that might be possible is encouraging builders to provide so that, provide a roof that would allow a homeowner to go solar or to put solar on to start out with, which would increase the value of the home. So maybe there's a way to increase incentives, voluntary incentives for home builders. I don't know, but maybe it's something that we should pursue at our.
And Scott,
Scott,
I
you
also
just
want
went
to,
on mute again.
go ahead,
Right.
Amber.
I was just going to say, I think that incentives are always an interesting idea, because that is something we can not control, but help move along. And once in a while when we're getting rezone requests that have we can't condition zoning of any type, that's illegal, but we can if we have different I think variances maybe, and also I'm forgetting the word for it, like if we're vacating any utility easements or anything like that, we can condition that piece of it. So it's a little tricky, but I think we have, on once in a while, we have some things that we can do that are conditions on developments, but not just zoning piece.
Yeah, and I was just going to jump in and agree with that, Amber, that incentive-based measures are allowed and encouraged. Back to a point Chris made early on is it's tough to find funding for incentives, and it's tough to try to prioritize different zoning issues as an incentive, like density and parking and those sorts of things. And so so that's one issue. And Scott, I just want to make sure that you know that the state is considering adopting 2021 IECC building codes. And so IECC is the International Energy Efficiency Code. And they are much better than the state's current goals. And they also include provisions in there that the city of Missoula could actually adopt a requirement that new residences have to be solar ready. And so there's some exciting stuff in there, and we're just kind of waiting to see if the state does adopt these new regulations.
That sounds
And
like a great opportunity.
So if the state were to adopt that, that would be most likely during the next legislative session starting in January.
I'm not 100% sure on timing. From my understanding, they are moving through the process now, and so it might actually be sooner. They had a public hearing last week, and a lot of people showed up and spoke in favor, so we're pretty optimistic.
Good.
So we've gotten a little off track here. There's important stuff, but as I mentioned, the city now has a contractor to begin this code revision process. So we'll be talking more about this undoubtedly in the coming months and years as this moves forward, and what's possible and what's not. So yeah, we're going to set that aside, but it is going to be an issue for us going forward. So back to the energy performance contract list from McKinstry. The last thing we had was Jeremy suggesting that folks work in the coming weeks to develop either a way to identify priority projects, or to go ahead and recommend priority projects and forward those to the team, so it's something we can act on, at least in a broad sense, at the next meeting. Jeremy, do you have any other ideas on that? Or is that going to be a work group, or just people working independently and sending information to you and I? Or
Yeah, I guess my question, Amber, I think you're still unmuted. So our next meeting is June 9th. Our next scheduled meeting is June 9th. Is that, if we were to have a recommendation, after that meeting, is that timely enough, or does it need to happen before that? I realize that nobody has a crystal ball to see the future, but what do you think from a timing perspective? I guess that's for both Amber and Lee, if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think the sooner the better. You know, I don't think June would put it out of the running. Do you have any sense, Lee, when you're not scheduled for any presentation at this point, are you?
No, we're still meeting with department heads and trying to fully understand with McKinstry what the funding piece of this looks like. Like, how do we pay it back over 20 years, and where does that come from? And how do we come up with any sort of down payment for some of these larger projects? So we're not really close, I would say, to making a decision or presenting to council. And
well, then, if that's the case, I think that June will work, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
What do you think
Sounds
about
good.
that? What do you think about that, Lee?
yeah, I agree. I think there will still be room for some recommendations. And again, I mean, you know,
Okay.
if there are some low hanging fruit that we're going to just push through initially to get this contract going, then there's opportunity then to kind of build in other projects as we go.
I have a question. So before we move forward after this and start looking at these to really put together a package of recommendations, the point of getting it in before the budget process is to try and fit these things in, correct? So are we looking at these, and is there like a cap on a project? Is there a limit we can spend? Are any of these like way outside of the budget? And if we recommended them, like, would that be a crazy ask, or how does that work?
So, you know, this is such a new thing, to be honest, for the city, that I'm not even totally sure all of this is going to come through a budget process, because I'm not sure how it looks quite yet. I think, as Lee said, we're still working through some of that. There may be pieces of it that come, it may be a kind of a standalone type of thing, depending on what the funding mechanisms look like. And there may be pieces that come through the budget process. They may come as contracts throughout the year. So I'm sorry, I don't have full clarity on how we are going to fund all of these and what that looks like and how that works its way through the process in city council. Lee, maybe you have a little more information on that. I think there's still a question mark around that.
Yeah, definitely. And Allie, as you mentioned earlier, there are some projects identified that already needed to be done. And so they've already kind of been accounted for in the capital improvement plan. I think that's what a CIP is. And so there's different sources of funding. And so some will be put in through a budget request, some will be in a CIP. And then, you know, there's also, as Chris talked about, potential for bonds or kind of creative financing that the city can take advantage of.
Lee, is there a list of capital improvement projects that are included with this McKinstry list? Like, are there specific projects that we know are most likely to happen because they're capital improvement and they need to happen?
I wouldn't say we know any of them are going to happen for sure, but there are some, like I think the roof on Fire Station 2, and then that air source handling, or that air handling mechanism that Allie mentioned on the Parks Department. Those are things that have been identified as they need to happen. And so whether we do them inside of this contract or outside of this contract, will happen. And you can kind of probably see as you go down the list some of the measures that don't have carbon savings, and you might say, like, well, why is this in there? Those are probably measures that the department requested McKinstry to look at, since they're going to be there anyway.
Okay, thank you.
Another example is the entranceway to the Missoula Art Museum. That doesn't have any sort of environmental benefit per se, but it's something that they have identified as a need for the building. And so.
Okay. Good to know.
I would also add, so if the simple payback is less than 20 years, that means there's no additional expenditure by that department. In other words, whatever they're paying currently for their utility bill, or that segment of it, they would continue to pay, and then work through the project over whatever the life of the project, that simple payback is. So like I'm looking at one here that's 4.2 years. So this is, while there's an expenditure, it may not be, it's not an additional expenditure. So how does that come to the budget? It'll be an interesting question, how that goes forward. But there's not a huge number of these that are under 20 years, but there's definitely probably 20 or 30 of them anyways. And so those can move forward more quickly than if they're over 20 years. The difference between what it would cost if it was 20 years versus and 25, that 5-year difference, we have to come up with that money up front. And that becomes a budget issue, a fundraising issue, and gets more complicated. So I think, we can focus short term on these simple paybacks of under 20 years. Those will probably move forward sooner than some of these larger ones that are going to require some additional financing.
Yeah, and one of the reasons we're looking at everything as a package is because we can actually buy down some of the larger projects with some of the lower payback periods. And so when we put them all together and the spreadsheet averages everything, we can actually kind of lower the payback on some of the higher ones. Not the 500-year ones, of course, but some of the ones that are slightly over 20.
Use the savings from some of the less than 20 years to pay down the greater than 20 years. So the net financial impact is neutral.
Exactly, which is why we're, using this overwhelming spreadsheet of all the projects, because we're hoping that will line out.
That's creative. That's well done.
Yeah, that definitely helps move forward some of this stuff that might otherwise take a little while to get through the process.
Chris, can I make a recommendation that by next Thursday, so 1 week from now, if there are any outstanding questions for McKinstry, that we gather those and you and I take those back to McKinstry with Lee and Amber as appropriate. So just kind of give folks a chance to dive deeper into the spreadsheet. And I'm sure there are questions that will arise from that. So that would be next Thursday, May 19th. And then by the following Thursday, well, actually, let me pause there. So we would work with McKinstry, get some answers to those questions, get those back out to the team, within hopefully a few days after that. And then we set an additional date, maybe for a week later, by which there's recommendations from each person on the team. And then we need to put that forward in the agenda, as I understand, for our June meeting. So we need to set a date by, the last week of May, probably, to have specific recommendations. And then we would vote on that in our June 9th meeting. Does that sound like a little bit of a loose timeline?
Yeah,
just trying to make sure that we have recommendations for our June meeting.
Yeah. So we have the questions from McKinstry by next Thursday, and then the follow-up on recommendations for our priorities. By which date was that, Jeremy?
I would say any recommendations from team members to be emailed back by May 31st. So May 19th, any questions for McKinstry? You and I take those questions back to McKinstry, get answers, get responses, and then any team recommendations of prioritizing, project A over project B would come back by May 31st. And then we will have our next team meeting on June 9th.
That sounds good. That's a good way to wrap this up. Does anybody have any last comments? I'm going to send out this spreadsheet, so it's a little easier to work on than that PDF version, along with those recommendations that Jeremy just made for proceeding between now and the next meeting. All right. I am, let's see here. So we're not taking any formal action on item 5.1. We're moving on to items 6, the non-action items. 6.1, this is the end of the first year of the youth team member program. I know we've only got one youth team member here. I did hear from Ellis that he's taken a test right now, a 3-hour test, so we wish him luck in that. But I have to say that we didn't always know what we were going to be doing, but I think it worked out. There's still some things to work through in terms of how we prepare a youth team member, how we recruit a youth team member. One of the things that is coming on in June is we're gonna present on the capstone project that we've been working on. And so that may be an element of it. At some point, this all needs to be sort of documented a little better. I think we're just sort of flying by the seat of our pants this first year, but I'm looking forward to improving the process. I'd love to hear back from the youth team members. I see we have Virgil here now, about what worked, what didn't work, how we wish to proceed, and any thoughts that folks have with respect to how this went in our first year. So maybe I'll just open it up and say, does anybody have any comments or suggestions?
I think it went really well. Like for me, this has been one of my, it's just been an incredible experience for me. And I feel like I've learned a lot of really great skills from being a part of this team and gotten to meet all you guys. You're such great people, and just, it's really been an amazing experience. And I'm so glad you guys are providing us this opportunity.
Any suggestions, Virgil, on how to, did you feel like you knew what was going to happen when you came on board? Was there additional knowledge or information you needed to be more effective? What did you think about this capstone project?
Yeah, I think my favorite thing has been so the capstone project, and then also last year when we were working on composing those letters to legislators. I think it's really cool that we, even though we're not voting members, get to contribute to the team in a way. And I think if when you're advertising the positions for next year, if you kind of explain that to the next youth team members, I think that'll be really helpful. Because I think that's probably the coolest part for me, is that I actually can make a change, and that's super awesome.
I love it.
Yeah, I would agree with Virgil. It's been a really amazing experience. Towards the beginning of my term, there were certain things that were hard to understand and took a while for me to catch on to. Kind of just the etiquette of the meetings in general and stuff. And I think for new members, it would be, I guess, nicer to be able to transition more easily into meetings and stuff. If you kind of knew the etiquette. I also love the projects we've been working on, and I really think we could have had time to do more action and whatnot. Even bring it into our schools and stuff, and show, help educate, involve other kids, because there's so many of my peers are taking climate action, but when I tell them about my position on this board, then they like they've never even heard about it and act really interested. And so I think, you know, getting the positions out there so that more people know about it too would be helpful.
Thank you for that feedback.
Yeah.
That was great.
I think we should definitely try to encourage all of the youth team members to, you know, share the information about the positions for next year. So if there's classmates, friends, neighbors, you know, science teachers or other teachers that can share that information out, I think word of mouth may be the best way that we have to spread the good news about the youth team members.
Thank you. And we are trying to recruit for this next year. So let's remember to get that note or that recruitment flyer I sent out to any interested people. And let's get
Yeah, and
another group.
I would also, hello?
Yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry that I'm so annoying today. Yeah, I really appreciate the youth team members, their comments and their feedback, and I'm really happy that it's been a positive experience for them. So that's great. Thank you so much. You've been a great addition to this team as well. So, you know, I was just going to tell everyone, if you know teachers that are that might be interested, to forward it to them. I've forwarded it to some of my daughter's current and former teachers, and they're distributing it. And so I just think that's a great way to kind of get it on specific, you know, kids and teachers' radars and start recruiting. So all of us have connections with teachers, so get it out there.
Sounds
Could I
good.
ask the students a question?
Yeah, Scott, and then Chad. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, this is for the youth team members. Would it have been more helpful to you to get a running start if you had had a couple of projects proposed by the committee? What do you think about, here's 2 or 3 things that you might want to think about, or you might have a project that you yourself want to tackle. What would help you get started?
So I think going off what Aviva was saying, I feel like for the first couple for maybe the first month or so, if we had a couple like youth team meetings like we've been having recently, just to kind of adjust new members to the team. And then after they kind of have a grasp of what it's like to be part of the energy and climate team, then you move on and give them some suggestions for projects. And that way they feel well prepared and, you know, ready to take on something.
Thank you.
I would also say in terms of the projects, it really helps to break down the background information. I know in the beginning it was challenging to understand a lot of what was going on. Just a lot of stuff would go over my head. And so giving more, I don't know, basic explanations, and then that can lead into more complex things that then youth members can take on as a project.
Thanks, Aviv. Chad?
Thanks, Chris. First off, I'd like to thank the student board members for serving. It's great to see our younger generation getting involved in moving things forward. The second thing is Chris, if you would send me that recruitment flyer or letter. I'm also on the board of the Missoula Education Foundation and have a direct line to the superintendent and staff, and can get that sent to all the high school counselors and teachers very quickly.
Thank you, Chad.
Awesome.
I will send that out. You know, and along some of the lines there, one of the things I would try to do for next year is to have, we had one brief training for the youth team members when they come on board. But yeah, I think as we talked about, having 2 or 3 training type sessions initially is about Robert's rules of order and how the meetings proceed, and a little more background on how, you know, what environmental or energy conservation is, renewable energy is, how those systems work, and some of that technical background as well. So I think that's something we will have to do going forward is have those upfront trainings. Megan?
Yeah, we host with the county twice a year a board training for new members, and they do record those. And I don't think there is an expiration date on the recording. So when we appoint the new youth, we could share that recording maybe right away that they could watch just kind of as a baseline training tool, and then meet with the group specifically on how it looks for the team.
Excellent, thank you. And also a question for you, Megan, have we gotten any applications in?
Not yet. I think there's a delay with the youth applications because sort of the hard copy is needed because it requires the guardian signature. So either it would require someone to drop it off, mail it to us, or scan it. So I haven't seen anything come through yet, but if anybody has ideas on how to digitize the parent signature, I'd be open to hearing that. But I will keep you all posted when applications start coming in.
So Megan, a follow-up question. If they took a picture of the signed form and you got a JPEG image of a signed form, is that sufficient?
Yeah, I think any kind of digital image, it doesn't necessarily have to be like a scanned PDF. I would accept a picture if you all would accept it also.
Sounds good. Well, that sounds, yeah. So there's a bunch of logistics there. One other thing I'll mention that's going forward is the president of the city council is going to send all you guys a letter thanking you and documenting what you've done so that you can have that for your records. So you should expect that in the mail here in the coming days. And Megan's helping to facilitate that. So thank you, Megan. So one little thing, we don't really have much else to hand off, but at least you'll have some documentation and a thanks from the city council. I just want to say that I found it really interesting to be involved in this process. As you know, no other boards in the city are doing this, and we hope some other boards take it on. And so this whole process has been informative, and we really do want to take what you guys have said and learn from this experience and make it better for the coming years. But that said, being the guinea pigs, I really, really appreciate you guys sticking with us and being involved and being strong participants in the process, always having good comments, good suggestions. One thing for me is when I talk about some of these technical stuff we get involved in, I try to remember that I need to explain in at least some detail as I start what we're talking about so that we don't just fly off and leave you guys in the dust. But that's definitely, we all need to remember that not everybody on the team has been involved in renewable energy and climate change issues for years and years. I need to remember that. But I personally want to thank you both and Alice for all your hard work.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And Chris, I'm hoping most or all of the youth team members will be at the meeting in June with the presentation. This is not like an official goodbye, correct?
The term ends at the end of this month, so they will attend in June. At least this is our current plan, as non-youth team members, but as community members sharing in their experience. but yeah, that's the plan.
So no tears for today yet. Save
No.
those for June.
Sounds good.
Aviv and Virgil, I will leave you guys on the Zoom invite for now as panelists if you're able to join next month, just to make it easy.
Sounds good. All right, well, we've got some additional stuff to work on. The next item up on our non-action agenda item is 6.2, Climate and Energy Team Retreat Planning. There was a draft outline put out there for folks to review and for us to update. I'm very thankful that Jeremy's taken the lead on this, and I think it'll be very useful, but I'm going to hand it off to Jeremy to talk about next steps.
Yeah. Chris, thank you for sending out the draft outline and plan for discussion topics for June, which is good. And, as Chris mentioned, any feedback, thoughts, other items that we should discuss, please, send those out as well. If anybody has specific things that they think we should touch on at the retreat in June. So thank you everybody for filling out the doodle poll. The date that seems to work best for the most people is Thursday, June 23rd from 12 noon to 5 p.m. Again, that's Thursday, June 23rd. I'm going to go through the list of everybody on the committee and just say yes or no. Yes, meaning that my understanding is that you can attend the retreat. No is that you probably cannot attend the retreat. And at the end, if I'm wrong or if I'm incorrect, please update me. Virgil Jones, unfortunately, is a no. Aviv Gusio is a maybe. Amber Sherrill is unfortunately a no. Chad Bauer is a yes. Ellis Walker Kelleher is most likely a yes. Megan Staten is a no. Lee Ratterman is a yes. Allie Kane is a yes. Jonathan Carlin is yes. Trevor Bell is yes. Scott McNall is yes. Brian Kearns is no. Chris Rowe is yes. And myself, Jeremy Flesh, is yes. Did I get that correct for everybody?
I think so. I hadn't done a doodle poll before that, so I probably did it wrong. I think I probably can go. I can't think of anything other than school, which I can miss totally for that. I don't think
Yeah.
I missed. So I think I
And
probably.
this, Virgil, that would be awesome. This is the end of June, June 23rd. So hopefully there's not a lot of school, requirements or things like that. So yeah. Did everybody else, were those yeses and nos, did those seem correct? Good, good, good. As far as a location, the original location that we were looking at, which was Chris's recommendation, which was an excellent recommendation, was the library. Unfortunately, it looks like the library is pretty booked up as far as rooms that would fit our group. Now that we have a final date, I will investigate that a little bit further, but I do think we're probably going to end up needing to look for a different location. If anybody has ideas or suggestions as far as a location, please let us know. And it looks like Chad has his hand up.
Yep. Jeremy, what's the total head count for the retreat?
Let me count it up. It's going to be roughly 10.
If you would like, we could probably use the conference room at the Chamber of Commerce downstairs at the Missoula Chamber.
Oh, nice.
I can shoot a quick email over and make sure that it's available. And if it is, I can just book it. It won't cost anything.
Okay, nice. And I do think, Chad, we're in the 10 to 11, maybe 12 kind of.
There's plenty of
number.
room for that down there.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to make sure that my count was similar to yours.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. And then I just did a tour of the Ronald McDonald House last week, and that's like one of the things that nobody really knows about. I guess they have conference room space as well, and it's
Okay.
plenty
These are
big
both
enough.
good.
And I know the fee's pretty minimal just because of being a nonprofit and whatever.
Right.
I
Okay,
can always
excellent.
check city conference rooms as well.
Okay, this is great to have multiple different options, and excellent. The next item, sorry, I think somebody was about to say something.
Oh, it was me. I was just going to say, I know in the past that Mozilla in Motion has used the like top floor conference room of Garlington Lawn and
Robinson. Yeah.
I don't know if there's a cost for that or if because we're technically a nonprofit that it was covered, but I think it's sort of a similar vibe to the library conference rooms. Good view.
Yeah, that's a beautiful space.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, excellent. The next item to talk about as far as the retreat goes is the facilitator. And Lee, we can work together just to, I think you had some ideas or some thoughts as far as good people to facilitate. Now that we've got the date of Thursday, June 23rd in the afternoon, hopefully we can move forward with that as well.
Yeah, I've started reaching out. Once I got that email yesterday, I started reaching out. So I'm hoping that we have some success. And Jeremy, I will keep you on the loop on that for sure.
Okay, sounds great. I think that's all that I had as far as the retreat, unless there are any specific ideas, concerns, suggestions as far as the retreat goes.
We did get some comments on what we should focus on from Scott, and thank you, Scott. And please, anybody else, if you have thoughts about particular areas that we need to focus on or direction that you think we should take, send that to Jeremy and myself. Retreats only work if people are engaged and think about this in advance. We started one of these just over 2 years ago as COVID was beginning, and then sort of shelved it. But over the last 2 years, we've taken a specific direction in focusing on city projects, city elements. But originally, the team was much broader than that. So when you look at our bylaws, it talks about community education, talks about some of these other things. We don't have to do any of those. We can kind of do within our bylaws what we wish to do. But if you think our current direction is too narrow, or there's other things that we could do, or you'd like to see us do, bring those forward, and don't necessarily wait for the retreat. Send them forward as emails or whatever, because we want to keep this as useful as possible and engage people as effectively as possible in the process. I don't think by the end of this meeting we'll have like a new strategic plan, but it'll be a good first step in establishing the direction that this team will probably go over the next couple of years anyway. So I think it'll be an important process, and really hope to broaden our appeal, our abilities to do our job, however you see that is. All right, Jeremy, any last thoughts?
Nope. I will kind of figure out the location and communicate out here, hopefully in the near future, so that we have as many things booked and ready to go as soon as possible.
Sounds good. No other comments. Moving on to item 6.3, plan for summer field trips. I know Jeremy's been giving this a lot of thought, and we've got a tentative list. Jeremy, do you have any comments on the summer field trips?
I don't have any, well, so number one, I do think it's beneficial for us to get out and, not only to see each other in person, but also to get some hands-on experience and exposure with specific folks in the field. And, I'm looking at Chad Bauer right there as well with the landfill. In addition to the composting facility and the wastewater treatment plant, and there was another one that was on the list. It's far more enjoyable to go to any of those outdoor locations in the summer or fall than it is in January or February. So I do think it would be a good idea to schedule one of those for either July or September. I guess we still need to talk about if we're going to meet in July and August or take one of those months off. But I think it would be good to get out into the field either in July or September or October, recognizing the weather component.
Those are, anytime we get together as a group, those are official meetings, so they would be noticed and all that stuff. So we do need to plan in advance. But yeah, the other ones I see in my notes, the landfill, we also have the library. There's a lot of interesting energy conservation approaches there. The wastewater treatment plant, as well as the compost facility and Poplar Farm. I also have written down here Mountain Lion and their facilities. Although they're now proposing a new $68 million bus barn, which is pretty amazing to think about. So those are some of the other ones. So we do need to give notice and have advanced, but they'll probably be during regular business hours and will be noticed in advance. So, but we'll try to get something out in July and August and get out at least 1 or 2 field trips.
Chris and Jeremy, I'll just throw it out right now. Just give me a date and we can make sure that we have a tour arranged. We can do the landfill and the recycling center if you want to do both, and we could do it in 2 hours. Very easy.
Perfect. Yeah, and also your resource recovery on the methane would be also very interesting.
Yep, that's all part of the landfill tour.
Sounds easy. We just need to set a date, put it out there.
Mm-hmm.
Do we want to do it? Go ahead, Jeremy.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to suggest like the July meeting, whenever that is, let's just go ahead and plan on being at the landfill for that meeting.
Chad, how close is the recycling facility? Is it there close to the landfill?
No, it's over at 3207 West Broadway. It's about a 5-minute drive is all. But what I'm thinking is if we schedule this for whatever date, I'll probably just grab a couple of like 12 passenger vans or one, depending on how many people we're going to have. And then we'll just shuttle around the landfill in those. And then we can run over to the recycling center and then bring everybody back to the landfill to pick up their vehicles.
Yep. July 14th is the second Thursday of July.
Yeah, noon to 2.
Yep.
And then we'll work on the wastewater treatment plant / Garden City compost / Poplar Farm for August.
Chris, are you thinking that we would meet in August?
Yeah, and it could be a special meeting for our field trip if we want to make sure we get together in August and talk about specific elements, like we are today. We can set up a special meeting for the wastewater treatment plant tour.
Okay, sounds good.
Any other suggestions, recommendations on field trips, things you want to see, things we haven't talked about? Hopefully folks can make that. Last item up is the city's Climate Action and Strategic Implementation Work Team, Climate SIWT. I missed the last, well, I guess I was on the last meeting, but I was otherwise occupied. But I think one of the things that happened at the last meeting that was really relevant, and Lee mentioned earlier, and please, for the folks that were attending there, Jeremy, Lee, and Amber and Allie were all in attendance, chime in, but really digging in on the notion of the climate lens, which is actually something we were kind of just doing with the McKinstry list, but how does the city, when it's considering projects and new procedures, how do they consider climate in that process? And so it's interesting because it's not as easy as it sounds, but it's great that we're doing it. So do the other folks involved want to jump in and have anything to talk about with that?
I guess I'll just say that, yeah, it's a much more involved process than one would think. The traditional markers of success for sustainability are considering people, planet, and profit. And so figuring out a way to kind of bring those all up to equal and then making decisions that way. And what else was I going to say? We kind of have identified that probably a climate lens will look like a lot of different things, policies, decision-making matrix, and or kind of justification as the funding and budget season comes by. And we are focused internally with this climate lens of how the city makes its decisions, but the ultimate goal with that, eventually it kind of goes out and we can share that with businesses and different folks in our community to help steward a climate lens community-wide.
That's a good idea. Thanks for that. I didn't know you guys were going to do a community-wide one, but yeah, might as well share this knowledge with the rest of the community. I'll say the city also put on this Jedi Training. Jedi stands for like justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, or something close to that. And so those are also very high priorities for the city. And in any climate lens or any other consideration, equity and inclusion and diversity are also key elements in the city's pie. And so I'm sure as this climate lens moves forward, there will also be similar efforts on some of the equity issues that are also always coming up. So lots of things to consider when you're deciding how to spend taxpayer dollars, which is good. We want to spend them wisely. We want to spend them fairly. So that's about it. There's a meeting tomorrow. And so we'll attend that one. And it's really exciting that there are 4 members from this team on that team. And so we're really helping to bring this whole notion forward on including climate change considerations for all city decisions. So it's really quite meaningful. And I'll have to say that the city staff that are involved are very engaged and very motivated. It's great to see. Any last comments on that process? Okay, next up on our agenda is item 7, general team member comments. You can comment on anything you'd like to comment on. You know, tell me what sort of long walk on a short pier I need to take, whatever. All right.
Don't go anywhere, Chris. No walks.
Thanks. All right. Seeing no other comments.
Sorry, I do have one.
Oh, go ahead, Allie.
I just have a question. The youth members were talking about it being really helpful when you start to have sort of like an intro to the process and the etiquette and things like that. And this is only my 2nd meeting, and I was wondering if there are some resources I can use. I know you mentioned earlier Montana open meetings laws, and are there some resources like that I can check out in the meanwhile between meetings?
You know, at the in that retreat outline, I have links to all the major documents that we follow, including the resolutions and the climate action plan.
Yeah.
Those are a really good place to start. And the training for board members, like Megan said, and maybe she's got her hand raised. If you can watch that on how Robert's rules operate and what is required of city boards, that would be useful. Megan?
Oops, couldn't unmute myself. Allie, I think you did RSVP for the board training that's on Monday.
That's right.
Yep. Dan Clark is awesome as far as training and being receptive to questions and explanations and all of that. But I could also, Chris, if it'd be helpful, send some resources that are on the city website. Robert's rules are there and kind of motion guidelines. So I'm happy to help forward some resources that the clerk's office has also.
Great. Thank you both so much.
And one other thing, my previous employer, the Department of Energy, has a tremendous amount of really good, accessible information when it comes to energy efficiency and renewable energy. And I'll send out some links, but it doesn't, basically any consideration in those two fields, the Department of Energy has a website about. And so if you want to learn more about those two things, the National Renewable Energy Lab, NREL, but just in general, if you go to the Department of Energy website and start looking up some of those, you'll find plenty of information and pretty accessible information. Any other comments? If not, our next meeting, it will be wherever we choose to oh no, I guess we're going to have a regular meeting in June on the 23rd, on the
June 9th.
7th, June 9th. And then the follow-up special meeting for the retreat on the 23rd. So 2 meetings in June.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, with that, I move to adjourn.
I second.
Okay. Sounds good. That's moved. We are adjourned and we'll talk again next month, but send emails and comments along the way.
Thank you, everybody.